Okay, I think that's the right time. We should get started. So welcome everyone to IETF Week. You've got me, Kirsten Payne, one of the co-chairs for Dispatch, joining virtually. And we've got Mary sitting at the front as a physical presence if you have any issues on site at all. And you might notice we've got a change of co-chair. So just to say thanks to Patrick McManus for his great stewardship and chairship of Dispatch over the years. I'm really grateful for all the contributions he's made. And replacing him, we have Peng Shuping. If you'd like to just say hi, Peng, introduce yourself, that'd be awesome.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Can't you? There we go. All right, so bear with us because it's always the first session, Dispatch, so we always have a bit of fun working out how the technology is working and how the sessions are going to work. So we'll just run through a couple of admin points before we get started. So I'm really sorry not to be joining you in person, but while I'm here virtually, let me just remind you of the Note Well. This is probably the first time you've seen it this week. So it's a reminder of the IETF policies that govern your participation. And please make sure that you've read all of these. You would have said at registration that you would do so. In particular, take note of all the kind of patent policies and general code of conduct and anti-harassment procedures, as well as the way the IETF works. If you have any issues, contact the Ombudsman team. And just to say that these are places for professional collaboration and networking. There are some extensive documentations that talk about the way that you should be behaving at these meetings. And if you have any concerns at all, once again, please talk to the Ombudsman team. It's important that we create a good environment so everyone can bring their best work and bring their best selves to these kind of technical discussions that we're having. So please reach out to the Ombudsman team or anyone around you that you trust if you experience any difficulties or offensive behaviour. So hybrid meeting participation, I think we're all still getting used to it. Perhaps you're well seasoned by now, but if not, please bear with just while we run through this because it is the first session of the week. So a lot of stuff might seem new or has changed since last time. So to the folks in the room, please make sure that you've signed into the session using the Meet Echo Lite client. There's a nice circle there to show you exactly the button to join. It's really important to join that because that creates the blue sheets, but also it's how I'm going to call the queue. So if you stand in the room at the mic, but you have not joined the queue on the Meet Echo Lite client, then I will not be calling you into the queue. So do make sure that you have joined the mic queue on Meet Echo. We're asking you to keep your audio and video off if you're a fully remote participant or if you're on the on-site version as well, and please use a headset. So I can see that we've got someone stood up at the mic, but possibly not joined on the Meet Echo client. So am I about to break my own rule? Just as an exception, what's up?
Colin. Testing. Okay, what's the user error? So I actually can't join the Meet Echo. It's not joining. It just gives you an error when you try and join or log in and says not authorized. And several people are having this problem. So how would you like to proceed?
Okay, I can see Mira has just joined the queue. Mira, do you have a response for that?
I think she's just testing.
I was just testing. So Colin, if you want to join, just I can click for you. I don't know.
Okay, well, this is exactly why we have Mary as a backup in the room. So perhaps, yeah, in this.
If it's helpful, if someone comes up to the mic because they can't join, I'll type it in the Jabber and you can manually manage it.
Super. Yeah, let's manage it that way for now. So we'll hopefully those issues will be resolved by the end of the week, but can see everyone joining the queue now. Yeah. Zaid Albana, did you want to make a comment?
I can't. Oh yeah, here we go. Hello. Comment.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I'm making a comment. Now I'm gonna leave the queue.
Okay, thanks. So I think if it works for you, then that would be the ideal way to join the queue. If not, like we said, just in person in the meeting, and we'll manage it via Mary. This is why we have our resilience strategies. It should be resolved soon. So anyway, try and bear in mind for the other meeting sessions that you have. This is the way we would like you to join the queue. Thanks, Colin, for bringing it into the meeting. do love having the first meeting of the week. It's very enjoyable. Okay, so just so you all know, this session is being recorded. It's very important that you know that this goes on YouTube afterwards. So just make sure anything you say, you're happy for it to be recorded and published that way. You can find all the agenda for the whole week at that link. There's also Meet Echo and other information. If you have any technical issues, please do see the reporting issues page. And all the meeting notes and slides and everything you might need will be on the dispatch page. There's also Jabber and Zulip that you can give a go as well for this session. Okay, I think we've got someone else in the queue. Jiri, did you have a comment about the setup?
No, sorry.
Okay, no worries. That's okay. We're going to have these kind of teething issues. That's why, again, it's the joy of being the first session of the week. So into the dispatch hybrid meeting, giving myself a healthy 4 minutes just to run through the agenda and take any agenda bash comments. So you can see that we've got a bit of flex time today, but we have 5 presentations starting between either 20 minutes or 10 minutes for various items. And then we have the art area session going on after that, which is why Murray's at the front and has to stay there for this whole session. Sorry, Murray, just for the kind of end bit to give updates from the art area. So we'll just pause here if there's any agenda bashing, keeping a beady eye on the queue in the room and on Meet Echo. Jonathan Rosenberg.
Hello, Jonathan Rosenberg, 5'9". It's not on the agenda, and I don't think we'll have time, but I submitted a draft called Spin. There's been a lot of discussion on it on the list. If we don't get to it here, I do want to let people know there's a Mimi BOF today. That's one of the side meetings. So we'll try and do some discussion there. And I do ask if there's any time at the end left over, anyone interested like to discuss this topic. Thank you.
We do mention it during the upcoming meeting stuff.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, any other comments before we dive right in? First on the presentation slides, it's binary application record encoding from Jiri, and we have got in the notes the links to the slides, links to existing messages and discussions. But otherwise, we'll just invite him to come up and present.
Hello, so it's up to me, I think.
Hi, yeah, Jiri, would you like me to drive the slides for you, or would you like to do them yourself?
If you can, I don't know how to do that in this system, so I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay, not at all.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
Great. Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Jiří Vlasak and I will present binary application record encoding or shortcut BARE. Please next. So the first, what is BARE? It's message encoding. This is binary. It codes data into the binary that are then used to store these data or transmit these data. The original author is Drew DeWalt. The main contributor of the updates is Victorian Elvinger, and I do connect all these awesome contributions into together and now presenting and trying to standardize this protocol. Yes, next, please. So, what are the goals of BARE? Well, first, concise messages. Then the schema, this is well defined, and so the broad compatibility with programming environments. Well, I guess that all the encodings are trying to do this, and the important thing is the simplicity of implementation. Next, please. So the use cases for BARE were in the Internet of services or Internet of things or these applications, the communication is really important. So you need some protocol to communicate these messages. There are plenty of these communications encodings, and so on. The barre, as we saw in the goals, has concise messages, simplicity of implementation, and is used to communicate between these web services or communicate between the Internet of Things devices, or to store some tokens into file systems and so on. So this is some use cases of the barre encoding. Please next. Yes, well, so this was in short the introduction, what is barre and how it can be used. And now I would like to present some feedback in the dispatch mailing list. Up to today, I haven't read the feedback that was sent today, so I'm sorry about that. And the first was the comparison into CB or OR, concise binary object representation. Well, regarding this question, I would like to say that the CBOR is based on JSON, which is itself the text-based. The main difference between CBOR and barre, in my opinion, is that CBOR contains the schema because it has the legacy of JSON format and trying to be compatible or JSON in binary world. Then these are kind of different in these specific things. This is the main difference, I would say. There are more differences, but this one is the main, I think. So please next. Yeah, there was another feedback about the schema language. I don't think that I understand it correctly, and there were no replies. Replies to explain that. So maybe this would be to the discussion. Please next. Yeah, well, one of the feedbacks was the request for measurements between CBOR and barre. Well, I did perform some tests with the scripts that is available on the link at the slides. In fact, it was kind of data structures that were 1,000 messages in one list that showed or that was corresponding orders in some imagined shop or e-shop, and just to have some base measurement, I used JSON as a uncompressed and text-based format. Then I encapsulated or encoded the whole list of messages in using CBOR, and then encoded using barre. And the next measurement was the same, but zipped or compressed form. If we can see the results at the bottom of the slide, when we use barre, the length of the complete messages is comparable to the raw data. When we use CBOR, there is some overhead which comes with CBOR because CBOR messages contains the schema of the messages, and when we use JSON, there is even greater overhead. The same applies for the compressed versions. So it's like that. Next, please.
Yeah, just to say that Paul Hoffman has joined the queue. I don't know if you want to take questions now or at the end.
Yeah, and definitely we may.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay, Paul, would you like to ask your question?
This is Paul Hoffman, co-author of CBOR. I think your previous slide and this slide have a pretty significant error. CBOR doesn't have a built-in schema. You can build one in if you want. That would be complete waste of overhead here. Looking at your example here, I cannot imagine how it would be twice as big unless you tagged every item saying, this is the name, this is this, which is pretty much not what anyone does in CBOR. So again, CBOR was not written to be shortest. It's written to be concise. That's very different. But I think your comparisons are pretty off because you're trying to force a schema into CBOR, which is doable, but not necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. I am really sorry about that. I will redo the experiment and update the thread, email thread. To be honest, I used the CBOR2 Python package to this and just let the default settings. So there may be some problem with that that I haven't find out. I will make note and dig deeper into this problem and try to do the measurement again if it's okay. Yes. So yeah. Next slide. Great. Well, the thing. The another feedback in the mailing list was the comparison with already well-known protocols used for encoding the messages. The examples are Avro, Protobufs, Cap'n Proto, Drift, and Flat buffers. These were mentioned in the feedback. So the first and most important thing is that none of the above is standardized, and I think that it makes sense to have some standard just because these frameworks or protocols are widely used. So having a standard that is well defined makes sense in my opinion. I would like to repeat what Bare has. Well, concise messages without schema, which means the messages are concise. It has the octet aligned messages with the little endian representation. When possible, the encoding is bijective, and the Bare is designed with the simplicity in mind, what I've already said. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is the comparison of the types used and available in encoding. It's kind of how to say. Well, I take the types which are in the Bare. So it's obvious that every types here is in Bare. This is just to show how the others how the others protocols are compared to Bare. So we can see that for integers, unsigned integers, and floats, this for numbers, there are I'm sorry. There are some types missing. First, Uuid and int are variable length integers or unsigned integers. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is other standard types. You can see that, for example, data with fixed length are really rare to be used or to be available in other protocols. Next, please. And the last are lists, optional, and so on. Yeah, next, please. So this is summary of the comparisons. When I was researching the protobufs, I really got lost with the variable length integers. I'm sorry, maybe something is misleading on the previous slides. I did it with my best knowledge and tried to do it as best as possible. Another thing is that it was hard to find out which types are supported. I needed sometimes dig deeper into the documentation, or it wasn't in the supported types or things like that. Other thing is that, of course, other protocols have more types or different types or another types like table types or something like that, but it tries to keeping being simple, and all the other types can be built up on the basic types of the barre. So this is the reason why some types are omitted. Yes, and the last one, there is clear distinction between primitive and aggregate types, which was sometimes in barre, which was sometimes also difficult in the other protocols. So next, please. Yeah, this was a question about the future extension points, but it specifies or for message for future message consideration, but suggest to use unions where all the available versions are defined in union, and later deprecation just means that the first message has the manually set tag in the union. Next, please. The other feedback was the using data or time. Well, we decided to not use special data time type in barre because a lot can be done just by using timestamp or unsigned integer or using other specification for date times and parse the date time. Next, please. Yes, and this is all I wanted to say regarding barre. Yeah, there are questions regarding the progress within IETF, which I'm not sure how this should go, and will be happy for help. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. So I'd invite people to join the queue either in person in the room or using the client if you're able to. Just to summarize, we've had some messages on the list so far suggesting CBOR and others suggesting that CBOR is not a competitor. And I think Richard Barnes posted just this morning saying he sees it as kind of a TLS plus 10%, so a small focus working group would be his suggestion. So just to remind participants, keep your answers focused on the dispatch question. Should this work progress? And if so, in what way should it progress? So we'll just call through the queue in the order I see it. So Richard Barnes first.
Thanks, Kirsty. So yeah, I appreciate the sentiment where this work is coming from. When we did MLS, we needed a compact encoding. We went with TLS encoding, which is, as I said on the thread, 90% similar to this. Even down to kind of the byte level, like the way structure encode, I can name exactly the things TLS does. In MLS, we had extend TLS a little bit, so I'm sympathetic to the idea that there's some need for extension. So it seems like it's not implausible to me that it would be useful to have a spec that just encapsulated the syntax, as opposed to folks continuing to reference to section 4 of RFC 446. and to extend it a little bit to cover, what people expect from a modern encoding system. I agree. There's a bunch of other binary encoding systems, but we've had a bunch of success with the TLS syntax and light extensions in the TLS syntax in the IETF. So my inclination here would probably be to do a small focused working group. If we're going to do anything, kind of a small focused working group, start from TLS and adding the 10% that we need for.
Okay, thank you, Richard. You broke up quite a bit during that. So just to clarify, I heard that you were supportive of forming a small focused working group. If that's not correct, can you please put it in the Jabber chat and I will correct myself. Okay, Eric Riscola next in the queue.
I think Richard was saying he supported a small working group to standardize the TLS syntax, not this. That's not actually my position, so I'm just trying to mirror it. I'm not particularly interested in the technical details. I'm much more concerned about the deployment situation. There are a giant pile of existing things like this, as you indicated earlier. And the fact that none of them are standards, I think strongly indicates there's not a lot of interest in standardizing this. And for us to standardize yet another one without any evidence of real market desire seems like a real fail. So my question to you is, which large constituencies want to use this technology?
Pardon, may you repeat your question?
I said, which large constituencies wish to use this technology?
Well, the Barre is used at least at SourceHut, which is the company of the creator of the encoding, and they use it for web tokens, for storing web tokens and communication with client. So at least this is the use case which is used today.
Sure. I think we can agree that SourceHut is rather smaller than Facebook and Google.
Definitely. We also had the feedback in the mailing list of some researcher that tried to find out something different than JSON for receiving data from the sensors because of the measurements, and this was particular case why we allowed in the standard the full compliance with IEEE 754 floating numbers, for example. So
okay, well, anyway, my comment is this should go nowhere until there's strong evidence that people actually want to use it, and SourceHut is like not even close to enough.
Yeah, if you or if you need some giant company like Google to back up this specification, I can't offer. I can offer nothing. I don't have such a company, but still, I think there is a need for standardization of something similar to Barre that would be simply implemented, which would be safe, concise, and practically with the same properties Barre has.
Okay, thank you. Just to say we only have a couple of minutes left in this item, so if remaining participants can make their comments short, and I completely agree that implementation is an implementation regardless of the size of, it doesn't have to be anti-competitive in that kind of way of having a certain size of implementer, but I think the point might be more about multiple vendors as is being discussed in Jabber. Okay, so next in the queue is Cullen, who's physically in the queue, I think.
Yes, Cullen Jennings, thank you. I think it would be useful to standardize something along these lines at IETF because we just constantly keep repeating this and building it individually in each protocol. We have a TLS and then a slightly different variant in MLS, and then several of the drafts I'm writing have a different sort of variant. So I think it would help us write drafts to have a tool that we could pull out of the box and use if we wanted. Obviously, sometimes use Seaboard, sometimes use this, sometimes use other things. So I don't see any harm, and I think it would be useful to pick, maybe it's exactly this one, maybe it's something, maybe it's the TLS one, I don't really care, but to form something that we can refer to and is standardized and is roughly along about the level of weight and complexity that you're proposing here. It basically has exactly the sort of characteristics of what you're proposing. I mean, if there was no other proposals, I'd be fine with Bear. It meets my needs exactly. I wish it had like a half floating point thing, like a 16-bit floating point too, but I'm sure we could add that. So I think it would be worth doing something like this. I don't know if there's a small working groups the right way, or whether we should, have a bake-off between several of the proposals that could be used and see what people want to go forward with. But I'd be in favor of having something. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin. And we'll just run through. There's someone in Jabber agreeing with you as well. Barry, you're next.
This is Barry Lieba. First, I'll say I agree with what Ecker said. The overhead in the IETF to standardize one of these things is high, and we really need to see that we need it, that it's going to be adopted, and that there's a pressing need for it before we get into that. So I have comments from two different roles. I am one of the CBOR co-chairs. Now, I have not spoken with my co-chair, but I would support discussing this in CBOR. I think Paul's comment kind of raises the issue that this should have been chatted about in CBOR to see what it adds, whether CBOR can be enhanced, whether it makes sense to proceed with BADE or whatever it is. So I think we should start the discussion there. And as the former AD who AD sponsored CBOR, I highly recommend not AD sponsoring anything like this ever again. That this really needs to go through some sort of working group, whether it be CBOR or a new working group that we set up for the purpose. But I'll go back to saying that I stress what Ecker said, that we really need to make sure we have a need for it before we go through the effort. Thanks.
I will
Thank
happily
you, Barry.
take that advice.
Great, thank you. Just to our remaining participants, if you could be extremely speedy in your comments, otherwise I'll cut you off because we have a full session today. Okay, John Clenson, you're up next.
I agree with Barry and Ecker, but I want to take a slightly different cast on this, which is that every additional one of these channeling Marshall rows is an interoperability problem because it sends us off in a different direction. And I worry about the need for this. I worry about the compression arguments in a world in which we have the kinds of bandwidth we do today and the cheapness of storage we do today, although I'd be happy to hear an argument why that doesn't apply here. But if we're going to do anything of this type, I would rather see an IRTF group or an art area charter and study effort or design team to bring the various advocates of these various formats together and see if they can agree upon something. A single standard for this class of things would probably move us forward. Starting that discussion in CBOR would be fine, but moving off in all different directions with more of these is a challenge for interoperability and not helpful for the internet. Thanks.
Just to clarify, you think the work should go forward in some form, possibly through a new group. David Skenazy in the queue.
David Skenazy, Google. So +1 to the folks that said this before. The reason that we have like 17 different non-standards in this space is that every company builds their own to fit their specific needs, and those are slightly different from one another. And that's why Google has protobuf, for example, and why Google hasn't like moved to standardize it here, because we want to keep change control and modify it if we feel like it. So if Source wants its own format, that's totally fine. It can use it. But unless there is a specific need from other vendors, I don't see any reason to progress this in the IETF. So the other vendors don't need to be the size of Google, obviously, but there needs to be market interest from outside of one specific vendor. So my personal thought on the dispatch question is, do not progress this unless there is interest from multiple folks interested in implementing.
Okay, thank you very much for the comment there, David. So that's the end of our review and the end of the item. Really for presenting. We summarise all the dispatch outcomes at the end of the dispatch session, but just to say that what I'm hearing so far and what I've seen on the list is that CBOR is not a good fit for this because this is different to that, and that a working group or forum discussion on this topic makes sense. But it doesn't necessarily have to be this specific proposal, and we need to see more interest from rather than just from one single participant. So, okay, we'll move on to the next item and refresh that at the end. If you disagree, silently to vote in Java. Thank you very much, Thierry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so next up we have Bron, and I think Shuping, you're running the slides here.
All right, thank you. Hopefully when this appears in just a second. No?
It's coming, I think.
I'll try and make this one a little bit quicker and hopefully we can catch up some time.
Hi, Kirsty. Could you please continue? I had some trouble.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Sorry, Bron, thanks for bearing with.
That's okay.
Cool,
there we go. Next slide, please. Let's get through this fairly quickly. I think describing the situation's fairly easy. Basically, you want to send a file from party A to party B, but neither of them are guaranteed to be online all the time, so you have to store it somewhere in between. Ideally, that third party that you're storing the file with, or random large blob of data, doesn't need to see the content of it, so you would prefer to encrypt it. But then you have the issue of how do you tell the receiving party how it's encrypted and how to decrypt it. Next slide, please. Sorry, this text's a little bit small, but ideally, party A creates and encrypts the blob, uploads the encrypted data somewhere, tells party B via the most easy to read and easy to use way, here's how you decrypt this when you've downloaded it, and then party B downloads it. So this slide is lots of noise, which you can read later. Next slide, please. I'll show the diagram of traffic flow because that's probably the easiest here. So the tricky bit here is the URI has to contain the key when it's sent to party B and then not contain the key when it's sent through to the file store as party C, because in that case, it's gone over the wire, it's gone in logs, it can be stored and the data can then be decrypted. And we don't want party C to ever see the plain text. So the question is how to do this. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, first I put in this. Obviously it'll take time to get to something like this, but I'd like it to be something that we can work towards over time. It's better if it's standardized, obviously. There's been heaps of non-standard versions of this. Every messaging protocol has something for this. So that's why I thought this makes sense to come to the IETF. The reason I came to it in the first place is I want to implement large file attachments with email, which means putting a URI somewhere in a MIME part saying download from here. What we have at the moment is that the URI is put as a link in the HTML version of the body with little or no annotation to say this is an attachment at all, but you can click on it, you can download it in whatever email receiving program you have. I want the same thing, but without the place you're storing it having to be able to see the plain text as well. And that means it needs to be at a low enough level that it's embedded in the libraries rather than in every single receiving program. And so you can pass the URI around as if it's plain text, and any program can then access it using the low-level libraries. The issue here, of course, is that nothing does that yet, and unless it's a standard, nothing will do it. And so we'll wind up having to wrap every single URI in every single little format in the same way. And if we can go, I think the next might be the last slide, which is an example of usage. So next slide, please.
Just to say to everybody's in the queue, do you want to take questions now or at the end?
Questions at the end, I think.
Okay, then we'll carry right on.
So, oh yeah, so possibilities for design. I have no ideas. This is not my area of expertise. I'd love someone else to take on this work, and I will help you if I can. But yeah, on the last slide, I have an example of yet another place where this would be useful. That's not the use case that I had. So if we could go to the last slide. And this is an example of a vCard that I pulled from online, and it has a link to a photo, and the photo is value type URI. I would love to be able to replace this with something that says link to a photo, and the server where the photo is stored can't see it. And that to backport this into every single format with separate encryption keys, very, very difficult. But if you could just say a URI gets downloaded and either has it's just plain text from the server and downloaded plain text over HTTPS, sure. So you've got transport encryption, but you don't have encryption on the server, or you have encryption on the server and it's downloaded as encrypted data and then decrypted locally with a key that is embedded in the URI, then you can just pass URIs around and use either case. And that's all I've got. So questions, comments?
Thank you, Bron, for sharing your work. I'll just quickly note, if people in the room are able to, it would be very helpful if you could scan the QR code again. That should allow you to register for the meeting properly and help us with our queue management. But first in the queue is Ted Hardy.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bron, for the work. I actually got in the queue to ask a scope question, so it's a little bit late. But back on slide 4, it looks like you had a party A, a party B, and a server, but it wasn't clear what happened if you also had a party C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K. Were you expecting each of them to be able to using the same decryption key for it? The vCard would tend to indicate that that was the case, but in that situation, it's sort of hard to figure out how any of those people can't re-forward it to party C to allow party C to have access to it. So if you could just clarify the scope, that would be useful.
Yeah, I think realistically, if you get a copy of the URI with the key, you are party B. If you don't get, you are party C. There can be one or N of each of these parties. So there's the party that has the blob and doesn't have a copy of the key, and there's the party that has a copy of the key. And the key can be considered a small version of the large data, really, conceptually. So if you get the key, then you can see the content. If you don't have the key, you can't see the content.
Oh, okay. So in a situation like that, I think one of the things you've got to consider is whether you're actually better off associating these as two URIs which have a relationship. So you could have like a URI that says this is the place where you retrieve it, and a different URI like a data URI that contains the decryption key that you want to send, so that you actually then can use multiple different paths to give the data URI without necessarily always including it in the URI, which is used along the path that party C has. But I think there's a real...
My question for that would be, how do you pass that around in the existing channels that accept exactly one URI?
So that's everything in computer science can be solved with one more layer of indirection. You create a URI.
Yeah.
Love carry them both. But the upshot to this is I really feel like what you're describing here doesn't have very strong confidentiality characteristics in the multi-party case. So I think you'd really want to write a draft where the security considerations, where you're describing what it is you're expecting the characteristics of the confidentiality or other characteristics you're getting out of encrypting this data would be, because I think it's
absolutely.
It's pretty hard from the slides to figure out what it is this would deliver. Thanks.
Yeah, no, this is very early stage, and it's mostly just working out, is this something the IETF wants to do? And if so, where should it happen? There's a lot more design work to do.
Ted, are you able to just answer that question? Do you think it should happen in the IETF? Interest.
I don't think that it's possible to answer that question without a draft that describes the security properties. So I would say the dispatch answer would be not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my answer to that, I guess, since it's probably worth answering, is that the confidentiality here is basically party B can leak the key to whoever they want to. If party B doesn't want to leak the key, we want to make it easy for them to not accidentally leak the key to party C. That is the main confidentiality requirement here, rather than really, really strong confidentiality, which is the same as if you sent them the raw file. They could leak it to whoever they want, but we don't want them to accidentally do it easily.
Thank you very much, Bron. Okay, we have John Levine in the queue, and I'd encourage people on Jabber, if you have comments or opinions on the dispatch outcome, please join the queue, which we'll be cutting shortly. So John Levine, over to you.
Yeah. As I'm sure you know, this is not a new problem. We have message external body going back probably 20 years. And I think it was important back when email had to be tiny, and then when email sort of got medium sized, then people started putting in attachments, and now we've come around again to the point where the files have gotten bigger than the mail servers again. And I think this actually could be addressed so long as you are willing to restrict its use to places where you have MIME bodies. It would be pretty straightforward to extend message external body to do this, but basically you'd add some more stuff to the external body with the keys and the stuff. And we already have the syntax to have a URL elsewhere in the message that refers to the external body if you want people to be able to link to it. So I would want to try to see if we can make that work first, because trying to invent a new URI format that is, well, this is a URL, but it also has passwords and stuff in it, I think that would give heartburn to the people who worry about URI syntax.
I really don't want to do it at that level, because then we've got yet another Baroque custom format that's only in one place for handling this, and every other place that you do URIs needs to do the same thing. So I would love to say that whether it's unencrypted data at the other end or encrypted data at the other end, you can ask your system library to please fetch this data, make the transformations required, give me the plain text.
So it's basically adding a decryption key to a general URI?
Yes.
Okay. Ugh.
In a way that doesn't get sent to the server automatically.
Yeah.
Does that affect your view on the dispatch outcome, John?
I still think it's a problem worth solving. I do, but I do think now we want to, but basically Ted and I are both saying, like, we heard fairly different things. Ted has issues of who can decode it. I have issues of is this a MIME type or is this a URI? So I think, it definitely is, if there were an appropriate working group, I suppose, since it came from email, I suppose it could go to one of the email.
I don't think an email working group is the right place for this.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah, actually, I guess.
And I don't think an email working group should even be trying to do this work in the MIME headers necessarily. I think it's a better place to do it inside the URI if we possibly can.
Yeah, but anyway,
so that's useful to others.
I do think it's worth doing, because I agree with Ron that people have hacky ways of passing around files that are too big to embed all the time.
Okay, thank you. So you think it's worth doing, more detail needed, perhaps a draft. Great. Eric Triscola, you're next in the queue.
Yeah, I think this is generally worth doing. As an aside, I think that the HTTPS plus blah, blah, blah is like, don't do that. But
like I said, I don't know much about this.
Yeah, sure.
What has happened.
I think this generally worth solving. I'm not as concerned as Ted is about the security properties. I mean, like, they are what they are, but that's if we just sent the thing, as you say, if you just sent the thing in the body, it'd be the same. So so it doesn't really bend me out of shape that much. In terms of location, I see Mark Nottingham's the queue behind me. It seems like this seems pretty small, so I would tend to think HTTP. I know it's not quite a great fit for HTTP, but we've already kind of like done a bunch of similar crap with, like, encrypted bodies and stuff. So it seems like it kind of sort of belongs. I suppose it's not HTTP. It may have to be a new working group, which is like kind of heavyweight. But Mark may have a different opinion.
Yeah, there was a comment on the mailing list that the Tigris working group might be a place as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you want it to be like bogged down in Tigris forever, I think Tigris has got like a much like bigger kind of remit. So I mean, maybe there's some way to carve this off, but I worry it's going to get clawed onto the bigger thing. But I don't feel strongly about it.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll cut the queue there, and so Mark Nottingham, you are locked in the queue.
That's the disembodied head. Hello.
Oh, good. I'm here. Oh, good. Yeah, Mark Nottingham, I kind of feel like this is an area that is prone to over-engineering if we're not careful. The most, if you don't want if you want to communicate a key with the URI, but you don't want to send it on the request, the most obvious way to do that is fragment identifier, as you saw. And with the URIs, the fragment identifier is defined by the format. So define a format with the fragment identifier. As I said in chat, I think the important part here to satisfy a lot of concern is to describe the security properties of that thing in the draft, and we'll see where we get from there. That to me seems like the most straightforward way possible. I feel like if we throw this to other venues or other approaches, we might come up with an overcomplicated solution.
Cool. Can I ask you to help me with this one?
I see. Yeah, but here's the problem. We live in the same city. I can get that. That's fine.
All right, let's do that when I get back.
Super. Thank you very much, Bron, for presenting your work. I think there I was hearing that a bit more details needed to understand the scope of the problem, but that the problem is certainly worth addressing, and a couple of potential avenues going forward, depending on the detail that comes from that draft or a bit more scoping. Okay, if you disagree with that, then please do raise it in Jabber, and we'll summarise at the end of the session as always. So thank you very much. And handily, we've got Mark Nottingham here ready to present his draft, and Shuping is driving the slides for us. So off you go, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is going to be extremely short. Ecker, did you have a question, or is the video frozen? I think the video is frozen. Never mind. I just have this haunting image of Ecker standing at the queue waiting to speak. It's a little disconcerting. Okay, so this is going to be very short, I think. This is about a draft that I wrote, I think now a couple months ago, privacy considerations for web feed readers. Next slide, please. People have kind of assumed that web feed, so RSS, Atom, that sort of thing are dead, that they're not really interesting anymore. In my experience and from talking to people, that's not necessarily true. Next slide. On the consumption side, there's a pretty vibrant ecosystem of different feed readers and different consumers that have built some sort of feed reading capacity into them. There's your standard kind of desktop feed readers. There's online feed readers. There are products that aren't feed-centric that also use them in really interesting ways. For example, the kind of top middle shell-looking logo there is DevonThink, which is a kind of a very interesting academic tool for aggregating information that uses feeds extensively if you choose to use it, that I happen to use quite a bit. Next slide. On the producer side, I think most people are aware that there are a lot of feeds out there. There's still a lot of sites that produce them, by default, either because the underlying tools generate them or because they have some constituency for that. To get some sort of metric on that, and just because I was interested, I wrote a little tool to scrape the people you follow on Twitter to see how many of their profile URLs had feeds. And it turns out that for most people that I checked, about a third of the profile feeds of the people they followed actually had, profile URLs had feeds, which was really, really interesting to me. That there's this latent kind of ecosystem of feeds out there that is just waiting to be used if people bother to use it. Next slide. And that to me is kind of a bit of a theme, I think, for how I think about this. The web feeds are a latent platform on the internet. They're out there. People don't think about them a lot, but they're still used every day and they're still available. And next slide. When I say platform, I mean things like what people call the web platform. So this ecosystem that you can build on top of. The obvious big one out there being the web, of course. Next slide. But unlike the web, feeds aren't really advertising driven. They have a lot of really unique properties as compared to the web. The information you get in feeds has a different tenor because it's not able to be advertising driven usually. Next slide. And so that makes me think, what can be done to improve and protect that platform? How can we bolster it so that it's more useful to the people who want to use it? It hasn't got a lot of love from the IETF for several years now, but what can we do to change that, I guess. Next slide. And so that's what led me, and that's kind of the thinking behind this draft. It's a draft talking about what are the privacy considerations for this platform. You know, when you're making requests, when you're handling content, how should a feed reader, what in HTTP terms would be a user agent, how should it behave regarding user privacy? Next slide. And I think that's all I have at this point. This is very, very early stage. I probably could have taken this equally easily just to the apps area art area, because I just want to kind of give people a heads up that I'm thinking about this and starting to talk to people about it. I'd love to hear any feedback people have. From a dispatch standpoint, I think it's too early to dispatch anything like this to another place, but I would love to talk about maybe getting a mailing list or something like that. So I'm just mostly this is just a heads up, but also I'm curious to hear if anybody has any feedback or any kind of comments about it. And my video is frozen because Zecker is still just standing at the queue, so I can't see the room.
Phantom echo. Okay, come on.
I think I have
folks,
to
get
reload
up
the
to-
page to unfreeze the video, unfortunately.
That's okay. Folks, any comments, questions, support for a mailing list, disdain at a mailing list, absolute outrage at the creation of a mailing list? Thank you, Paul Hoffman. And we'll get other people joining the queue. But Paul Hoffman, off you go.
Paul Hoffman, surprised that I'm not seeing more support. I definitely support this. When we did Atom Pub, you know, in the Paleolithic era, there was a lot of interest. A lot of stuff happened. It became invisible, but as Mark said, it's still there. Adding privacy, even talking about privacy would be a good thing because this is definitely part of the ecosystem still. It's not like we're trying to do, or I assume Mark is not trying to make this more important and, you know, Web 3.5 or whatever, but just, you know, something to say, we started something. We should keep working on it in a privacy level. So definitely interested. I think a mailing list would be a reasonable start. And if it needs to be a working group, I think it can be, you know, an easily set up and what later, but a mailing list for this and talking about other privacy issues, especially across formats, would be just fine. Thank you.
Comments? No? Yes, so we could go to the mailing list for more discussions. Mark? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Thank you very much for presenting, Mark. Yeah, so I think the outcome there, again, disagree in Jabber if this is wrong, but it sounds like we would create a mailing list for further discussion. And a couple of plus ones there to starting a list and seeing how much energy there is and hoping it will get people thinking about RSS more. So super. Move on to our next presenter.
Hello, welcome. Can everybody hear me okay? Just closer. Closer? All right, that's why I did it. All right, thanks everybody. Good? Even closer. How about that? This is why we tested. Is that good? A little better? Right, good. Awesome. Hey, thanks everybody for having me today. Online, I got Bradley Peabody with me, other co-author of this. Today we're going to talk about new UUID formats. Really, it's new UUID versions. Next slide, please. So a couple of the problems with RFC 4122 is that the main timestamp-based UUIDs suffer poorly from database index locality problems. The UUID version 1 that we call it has a very uncommon epoch choice, the Gregorian epoch, which goes to a timestamp length of 100 nanoseconds, which is pretty odd, right? And then to further compound that problem, they split the epoch up into a weird way. Sorry, get my hands out there. And it just causes all kinds of weird issues. So we've taken an examination of that and figured out a different way to do it. And we actually found a lot of people on the internet who are untangling that epoch and just slapping a version 4 on it. So we're going to try and standardize that as version 6, so the people who are doing this and want the benefit of it have a place to do that in a standards track. We've also got some security concerns that we want to address, such as things like MAC addresses in the UUID and using cryptographically secure pseudo-random generators. And then we need some better clarifications around UUID generation versus UUID storage in terms of things like databases. And overall, just a lot of clarifications around little things like big endian versus little endian, stuff that the erratas have been opened on 4122. And we've kind of tried to address as many of these as we could in this update to 4122 under some of our new versions. And I'll go through those real quick, real fast. Next slide. It's not me. Okay. So UUI version 6, like I said, it's the time-based input. It's the same as UUID version 1. We're just not swizzling around the bits. We're taking the timestamp as it is, that 100 nanosecond Gregorian epoch, and we're laying it down. And then the rest of the UUID layout is exactly the same. And this is something that many places have been doing, and they either put like a version 0 on it, which is weird, or they throw it as a version 6, so it looks like it's a random address. But that's all we're doing with a version 6. So we're just labeling what other people are doing out there right now and giving them a place to do it officially. We also make the subtle hint to try and not use MAC addresses, but we're not going to outright say you can't use MAC addresses, because if we want to, you know, have a one-to-one conversion and people want to swap from version 1 to version 6, they can do that under this pretty easily. Next slide, please. So version 7 has really been the focus, right, of this. We've looked at this and we've said, what can we do better if we were going to make a time-based UUID right now? And the obvious thing is to use a better epoch, which is the well-known Unix epoch. And then it comes into questions like, how long do we make this? What precision level do we make this? And there's been a lot of back and forth, and we ended up laying down a 48-bit Unix epoch with a millisecond timestamp. And the rest of the UUID layout is random. It's entropy. And you can move the slider left and right. And if we move a little bit more timestamp, we get one side of the field who's really angry. If we move it to the other way and give it, you know, less timestamp, the entropy folks, you know, both sides are very heated. We laid on and landed on millisecond timestamp so that it's the most ubiquitous to implement. There's lots of libraries that can do this. The timestamp is very well known. It caters 99% of the use cases. Next slide. For those other 1% of the use cases, those folks that want to use a custom epoch, they want to start something right now and start counting up time. They want to use nanosecond level. They can use UUID version 8, which is every bit of this, except for the version of the variant, are for you to use in anything you want. This future-proofs our spec, allows very custom UUIDs to have a space, experimental UUIDs to have a space versus slapping a version 4 on it. They can do that under version 8. If you want to take version 7, fork it, and do whatever you want with it, you can do it within the space of a UUID version 8. Next slide. Lastly, this is kind of an oddball UUID, but we're just writing down and saying that the maximum value for a UUID is being defined in the spec, which is all bits set to a 1. 4122 sets the nil UUID as all bits set to 0. We're just writing down the opposite of that so that library generators can actually write this down and reserve it so you don't use it in some weird way. This is for some needle in a haystack operations. There's a GitHub thread about why you might use this, but we kind of have a small section about this maximum UUID. Next. All right, so we've done a lot of prototyping. We've done a lot of data modeling. We've been working on this for, I mean, Brad's been working on it for about 3 years. I've been working on it for about 2 years. We have taken everything we've done with library implementers, prototypes, and put this into kind of a swan song to the implementers out there. We've solved a lot of problems, and whether it be you using version 7 or making your own under version 8, we have a really nice list of what you should do or should not do. Some of these are like timestamp granularity, reliability, source, precision, and accuracy, fuzzing, altering, smearing, padding, or truncating, right? Your UUIDs. Let's say you can only generate 32-bit Unix timestamp. How do you make that work in the 48-bit space? Monoticity and counters for when things need to be laid down in a database in an exact order. How do you do that? What's the placement that makes sorting really nicely? How do you generate those or seed those from the beginning? How do you increment those? Is it a random increment or is it a linear increment? And other topics like distributed UUID generation across multi-nodes that may not talk, collision resistance mechanisms, local and global uniqueness, CSR unguessability through CSPRNG, sorting considerations, opacity and introspection, database considerations that we talked about really briefly about what's the best way to store these in a database, and then finally, of course, security considerations. We've gone at great lengths to really put the last half of this document as this is what you should do, and this is the best way to do it based on all of our research. And then last slide, I just want to talk real quick about, do we have a need? Yes, there's a lot of energy from our community on the next generation of UUIDs. A lot of people like UUID version 7, and you can see that yes column in the middle. Almost everybody is implementing that. I have a lot of UUID version 8s out there that I have to find that are folks who really liked what we had maybe in a previous draft, and then we tweaked something, and they said, well, I'll keep that. I'll put it as an 8, and then they just throw an 8 on it, and it gives them the space to do that. There's more implementations, but those are on version 2 or version 1 of our draft. So they're slowly being updated, but you can see there's a lot of different languages. There's a lot of different folks who have contributed to this, and there's a lot of energy around getting that UUID out there and standardized in a new way. And that's it. I'll take questions, comments, or concerns.
Okay, folks, time is now. Thank you very much, Kaiser, for your presentation. I'll just give people time to join the queue, either in the room or virtually. Any questions, comments, and don't forget the dispatch question. Should this work go forward, and if so, in what form? So first in the queue, we have David Skenazy.
Thank you. David Skenazy, Google. Thanks for this presentation. That was exactly what we were kind of looking to hear, and so thank you. Clearly, there's interest in this, and clearly you've done a lot of homework. I would like to see this published. It sounds useful. As far as dispatching it, if there is an AD willing to AD sponsor this, that might be the simplest path forward, but otherwise, maybe a very small, tightly scoped working group with a single deliverable would work. I'm just trying to find the least resistance way of doing this, but I think this should get published.
Thank you. We definitely scoped this to fix exactly the problems we needed and took anything else out of 4122 and set it to the side and said somebody else can fix those problems. This is what we want to focus on.
Okay, so strong support there. Any other supporters? Any questions, comments? We're going to need more support than just one person here. I can see Cullen Jennings in the queue.
Cullen Jennings. I support the idea of forming a working group to sort of deal with the care and feeding of UUIDs. Like if you go and look at all the traffic that these guys have had about the nuances of this, it's one of those things with a lot of subtle complexities that sort of break things. Like who would have thought of the database index? I mean, there's all these issues. So I think having a long-term sort of place where if any of these updates come, we get the knowledge in one place that sort of knows the history of why things are the way they are and what went right and what went wrong is probably pretty good. And there's a lot of errata on those drafts too that just point out like, wow, like we probably should be doing a little better. Keeping those as well-maintained standards, I believe might be the words that come to mind. So I'd be in favor of doing something that allowed this to be a well-maintained standard.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cullen. Alyssa Cooper, you're in the queue.
Thanks, Alyssa Cooper. So I was just looking at the history of 4122, which also looks like it was AD sponsored, but I wasn't here at the time. So I don't know, Ted or Barry or Pete, people who remember if that was a good choice. But agree with Cullen that it might be that wasn't a great choice, and that's why we have a pile of errata and other things. So it's worth learning from that experience and having that inform what we do next.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. There's a comment in the chat from Lucas Pardew just saying this work seems valuable if only for UUID version 7. Eric Riscola, you're in the queue.
Yeah, so this does seem like a reasonably compelling argument that something needs to be done. Just looking at the body of work here, I think it'd be inappropriate to AD sponsor it. Like if there's much work behind it, it should be a working group, even if it's a very fast working group, because that's like how things get handled.
Okay, then Murray's noted that RFC 4122 is AD sponsored by TED. So it seems like the mood of the room is either that the work should go forward and it should go forward in the least frictionful way possible. So either a small, tightly scoped working group or an AD sponsorship. Murray, as the AD in the room, any comments on your view or something for us to take offline and discuss?
I think probably the next step that I would like to see is who would be willing to help develop a charter for this. So as soon as I ask anyone to sign up and actually do the work, I guess we can ask on the list for help developing a charter, but I'm hearing that's probably the preferred way to go. And I can take up whatever the responsibility role for that is.
Yes, thank you. I can see a couple of comments in Jabber as well. Working group sounds good, or working group is the path. And there's some discussion to be had about whether it should just be for this draft or if it could be a more general long-term care for UUIDs. But that would be worked out in the charter, I suppose. So I think there's no more comments, no more people in the queue. So we'll just say thank you very much, Kaiser. I think we have our dispatch outcome. Thanks very much for taking the time to present to us here. And so we move on to our last agenda item for today, the discarding priority of RTP video packets. There's been quite a bit of discussion on the list about this. So we'll just stop sharing the slides if that's okay, Shuping, and I can share the new slides. There we go.
And just hold it. Can you hear me clearly? Yes, cool. All right. My name is Li Jundo. I'm going to present this discarding priority of RTP video packets. In this presentation, I mainly want to show you that the importance of the packet payload would decide the discarding priority of the packets when network congestion happens. So then I also want to discuss how to achieve this prioritized discarding when network congestion happens through the DSP field and mapping. Next slide, please. As all we know that RTP is a protocol dedicated for transport of real-time video and audio streams, and are typically on top of UDP. So there is no guarantee of packet delivery. RTP packet formats for different video codecs have been specified in IETF for various codecs. And by reading those drafts, I found out that there are actually priority indicator of the packets in those RTP headers, or say they call it NAR headers. So I will briefly talk about those in the next following slides. Next slide, please. So for H.264, the coded video data is organized into the NAR units, and then the RTP packet for H.264 video inherits the same NAR unit header. So it has two bits here called NRI field. It indicates the relative importance and transport priority of the NAR unit determined by the encoder. So the higher value of the NRI shows the higher importance of that packet or NAR unit. And they have different types of packet payload structures. For a single NAR unit, so there is only one NAR unit inside the payload, and then that NAR field would be associated with this single NAR unit. For aggregation packets, there are multiple NAR units aggregated into the single RTP payload. So the the value of the NRI is the maximum of all the NR units carried in the aggregation packet. And then for the fragmentation units, it means that a single NRI NAR unit actually is fragmented into multiple RTP packets. So as you can imagine, all the FU packets will have the same NRI value. And quoted from this draft, so for more important NR units needs to be better protected against transmission loss or packet dropping than less important NR units. Let's go to this next slide. And then.
Yeah, just on the slide change, sorry, a quick reminder, timely reminder that mask
Oh,
wearing
okay,
is
okay, I'll go
required.
quickly for the next few ones. Yeah.
To wear a mask.
Oh, okay.
To wear a mask if you're present in the room, that's part of the IETF requirements unless you have an exemption for it. So to put on a mask.
Okay, do you want me to take the mask right now?
No, you're fine.
I'm fine.
Vendors are fine.
Okay.
It's for people in the room, okay.
All right, okay. Thanks. And then for SVC, it also has this NRI 2 bits to indicate the relative importance and transport priority. Additionally, it has the 3 bytes in the NR unit header, which includes the PRID, which is called priority ID, which it has 6 bits, and also DID, QID, and TID, because SVC actually supports the different levels of scalability. Next slide, please. And for H.265, because it has improved support of temporal scalability over H.264, it includes this TID, which is 3 bits. So it indicates the temporal layer of that packet belongs to. So the lower temporal layer means more importance because it's the base layer. It will be used to predict other layers. So the TID, the lower value of TID means more important of that packet. For layer ID, it is not used in H.265. Go to next slide, please. And so for H.266, it has the layer ID and the TID, similar as H.265. However, additionally, similar to H.265, of course, the TID indicates the relative importance. And then it has this layer ID, which is 6 bits. It is further indicates how important the layer ID is. Further indicates how important this packet is. Go to next slide.
Yeah, just to let you know, there's someone in the queue. Would you like to take questions now or at the end of the presentation?
I can ask it now real quick. Just a informational comment. There is
say
a
your name,
draft.
sorry.
Mozinati,
Mike.
Cisco. Mozinati, Cisco. There's a draft in ABT Core that's close to RFC called video frame marking that goes over a lot of these points. And what it basically does is it normalizes across all of the codecs, not just the ITU codecs, but also alternative codecs like VP8, VP9, AV1. And it normalizes them into a common format for describing the dependencies and the priority of the temporal and spatial layers. And so really all that's missing is in your draft, you can, instead of referencing every single codec, you could reference an RTP header extension that carries that same information. The difference is that you're jumping all the way to mapping that directly to a DSCP priority. And that's a step that we've had a lot of argument about it before, about how to do that mapping. And so I'd suggest you separate those two things. One is identifying the layers and the priorities of the layers very specifically. And there's already RTP header extension to surface that codec agnostically. And then mapping that to a network priority is a separate problem that I think is probably better in like transport areas.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that draft out. Yes, I'm aware of that draft. And before, of course, after writing this particular draft. Yeah, I will definitely refer to the draft or extension header you were mentioning about later for a later version. Okay, next slide, please. And in those drafts, all mention the media-aware network element. So it is the element which is such as, middle box or application layer gateway, which is able to parsing those RTP packet payload headers and even RTP payload to reacting to the network congestion. But due to the explicit layering in protocol stack, the upper layer data and headers are transparent to network layer. So the intermediate routers have no access to those information. Go to next slide. Even though we have the media-aware network nodes maybe deployed at the edge or certain routers in the middle of the network, but when network congestion happens, for those routers do not have those, media awareness, you won't be able to react to the network congestion properly to discard those less important packets. So what we can do, go to the next slide. We can actually maybe using the DSCP to indicate the importance of those packets. So the NRI field has 2 bits, TID field has 3 bits. So DSCP value may be able to be mapped because, as it has 6 bits, maybe can be used to map according to either the NRI value or TID value, as well as the video types. So either the video host or the source or the MANE at the diff serve domain edge can do the mapping and set up the DSCP value for each RTP packet. Then the discarding precedence of those RTP packets can be determined when linked congestion happens. Go to the next slide. So this is just preliminary consideration how to map the DSC RTP, how to map those NRI value into the DSP values according to the video types. And we will discuss those later. Let's go to the next slide. And also we have this kind of mapping for the TID value. Go to next slide. Oh, cool. Thank you, Kirsty, for showing this slide for me. So in the email list, Magnus mentioned this RFC 7657. So if in general, quoted from this draft, marking packets with different DSCPs would result in different PHPs being applied at nodes, may generate reordering issues. However, so in that draft, it recommends to map a single network 5 tuples, use PHPs from to a single F class, which means there is only 3, in each F class, there is only 3 dropping precedence. So it won't not be possible to map to NRI or TID to a single F class. One is 4, another is 8. So single F class is only 3 values. And on the other hand, actually UDP is not sensitive to reordering the network. So maybe we can use different DSCPs whose corresponding PHPs enables reordering within a single UDP tuple. So what I was thinking, maybe, instead of just map to a single AF class, we can map to multiple AF class, as I mentioned in the previous 2 slides. Go to the next slide, please. And another thing is about, you have the H.266 and H.265. SVC, you have the PRID, which is 6 bits, which provides more granular priority information about that packet. And also you have the H.266, the layer ID also is 6 bits, which again, providing more discarding priority information. So many DSCP values are already being used and could be available. So are there any other ways to achieve this packet level dropping precedence within flow? Maybe we need to consider other solutions, if discarding precedence as final granularity is considered to be supported. Okay, all right, go to next slide, please.
Li Jun, we got people in the queue. Do you want to take questions now?
Yes. Okay. All right. So obviously, this is maybe relevant to AVT core. However, AVT core major scope is to specify and maintain payload formats for use with RTP. May not consider how to actually use those values in the network layer. And I think most relevant may be the transport area working group. Yeah, that's all for my presentation. I will take questions.
Great, thank you very much for your presentation. We do have folks in the queue. Please add yourself if you have a view on the dispatch question. So first up, Resnick.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, this is Pete. It seems pretty straightforward that the people who can evaluate most of this are in AVT core. So I would suggest taking the document there as the dispatch for this. And someone mentioned in the chat room that perhaps DSVWG could take on the DCSP bits. And I think that would be fine, but AVT core has the expertise to evaluate this, so you might as well take it there in the first place.
Right, thank you for the suggestion, yes.
Thank you very much, Pete. Magnus Westland.
Yeah, Magnus Westland here. I think AVT core is a good next steps, and there maybe you can try to explain your use case for this and how it actually relates, because if you have like the mains exist mostly in this type of different centralized conferencing, etc. If it's not IPTV, I wonder, because there's, as I wrote in the latest email, there's multi-stream aspect of this, which makes doing this across all the media streams blindly is unoptimized in many ways and lose you more quality than doing it in a media-aware and application-aware way. So I think there's a question saying, what are you really trying to accomplish here? What do you actually need? So, but I think AVT core is a reasonable place to discussing this, but it comes to RTP and the usage and architectural question here.
Yeah, so I mainly want to, use those bits in the network layer when network congestion happens, just to randomly, instead of randomly discarding packets, it may, if the router is able to know which packet is more important for decoding and to improve the user's end of quality or quality of experience, maybe it's better to expose those bits.
I still think you need to explain what the application is in usage, because to me, it looks like in those applications, I know that uses RTP. Trying to do this in this way is probably suboptimal. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go for it, Mosanati.
Mosanati, Cisco. If the goal is to make sure that that delivery is optimal, then I don't think you want to restrict your focus to just DSCPs, because what we found is that layer 2 can also create a lot of problems when it comes to prioritization. So if you really want to look at the delivery to be optimized and what should be dropped, you should also look at things like Wi-Fi upstream priorities, and even in mobile networks, look at the more complicated ways that RANs can also prioritize things. So I don't think DSCP is really going to give a lot of benefits to, especially since it's usually not carried through interoperably across a large segment of the network. So if you really want to optimize the prioritization, you need to look at all network layers and see where priority lives at all those layers and give some guidance at each layer.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Yeah, I agree, like DSCP may have remarking issues, so it won't carry all the weight from end to end. Yeah, we probably need to consider if there is other fields in the IP protocol which can carry this kind of information that could be leveraged by network nodes. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you very
more
much for
questions? Yeah.
today. There's quite a bit of information saying to take this to AVT core, a couple of +1s for taking it to AVT core, and the DSCP part to TSV working group. So if you could express your opinion on the dispatch question and those options as well, that would be really helpful to people in the queue. So thank you. It's Mira Kuluwind.
Yeah, hi, Mia Kulevind. I agree. So for the dispatch option, going to AVT core or to TSV WG would be fine. If you go there, I want to add to Magnus' comment that I think it's not only about the use case, it's only about showing data that this is actually an improvement, because usually the video streaming is adaptive. So like you shouldn't have long periods of congestion. It's like a few packet loss that you try to optimize for. Not sure if you actually gain much performance by that.
Yeah, I agree. Like for adaptive, if the network congestion can be fed to information fed to the source, it will cut down the rate. Yes, and I'm talking about for like those short time period where congestion is not aware to the source. If the network could optimize this kind of packet dropping.
Yeah, but like ideally that's really like a very short point of time, just like a few packets, and then there's also ECN you can use to avoid packet drop. And also I'm not sure that like this is the best solution.
Yeah, ECN is also to reflect network congestion. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Next we have Omir Shapira.
Hello, Omir Shapira, Apple.
Sorry, I cannot hear you.
Omir Shapira, Apple. +1 to what has been said before, that the DSP bits probably should belong to traffic, but to transfer. But additionally, the concept of service classes is not limited to video. Other transport streams may benefit from that. And additionally, the notion that UDP is not sensitive to reordering may be true for some protocols running on UDP, but I find it difficult to generalize. For example, QUIC may be more sensitive to reordering, and the router may not know the difference between QUIC and RTP. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'm aware of those issues. Yeah.
Thomas Eckert, FutureWay. So to Miriam's comment of whether this is important or not, there have been good results from the past, shown that it obviously is valuable, because the impact of losing even a single packet of a reference frame like an iframe in a video stream may cause a complete interruption, blackout of a video stream for a whole group of pictures, which, for example, in something like Dish Networks has been up to 5 seconds, whereas a similar loss of a packet for a non-reference frame like a pre-frame just causes a blip that any good setup box can hide from you. So there is a totally different degree of impact of even very short packet losses. And even with ECN, we've seen that we can't completely avoid any loss. So I think managing that loss in this manner is a highly valuable thing to do, especially the more you're getting into real time and non-delay.
Thanks, Taurus.
Thank you very much. Just to say that I'm hearing that it sounds like a lot of support for making this AVT core and TSV working group once the use case and performance gains have been clarified. If you disagree with that summary, please come up to the mic and express that. If you agree, then also please come up to the mic or put it on Jabber and express that view. Next in the queue is Jonathan Lennox.
Yes, Jonathan Lennox. To the dispatch point, as an AVT core chair, I think this would be entirely in scope of AVT core. I mean, again, with the TSVWG doing the diff serve parts. To the use case point, I think it depends. The network assumptions you get for like set-top box streaming versus interactive video conferencing are quite different. And I think that if you're looking at a set-top box streaming type use case, I think this might be more, I mean, I think this might make more sense than the interactive video conferencing types cases where you do have, typically do have retransmissions and you have much more dynamic codec adjustments. So I'm not sure what, so, but I guess that gets to the point of what your use case is here.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have exhausted the queue. So just to summarize, the outcome being clarified use case, no gains in performance, update those aspects, and then take to ABT and TSP working group for the DSCP specific aspects. So that's the end of the dispatch part of the meeting at the moment. So just to run through a summary of the dispatch outcomes, which we will also email to the list and make sure the minutes fully reflect this. The bar A dispatch outcome is a possible working group or discussion forum on this topic because it repeatedly comes up, but not necessarily this exact proposal. There was a consensus that it needs to be more widely applicable and implemented more widely than only one party. Therefore, the outcome is to find more supporters and return with this proposal, possibly others for working group scoping. On bronze item, transparently decrypting URIs, the outcome was that the work is worth doing. There are more specifics that need detailing so it can be properly assessed and sent to the right place, since we were hearing differences between SMIME or HTTP kind of similarities. So come back with a draft for the work to progress. On the web feeder reader dispatch outcome, very simple, create a non-working group mailing list on this topic. For the UUID dispatch outcome, there was some weak support for a working group forming a tightly focused or a longer term caretaker for UUIDs and maintenance of the drafts. So that will go to the dispatch mailing list to find volunteers to form a charter and flesh out which of those two options it would be. And then finally, discarding priority of RTP video packets. The dispatch outcome was the use case needs clarifying, gains in performance need clearly demonstrating, and then once those aspects have been updated, to take it to ABT Core and TSP working group for the DSCP specific aspects. So that's a rundown of our dispatch session today. Thanks to everyone who presented. It's always really nice to see new work coming to the IETF. Really grateful for you bringing your time and effort to us. And at this point, we'll shift into the art area portion of the meeting. So I'll just share the slides and then hand over to Murray. Over to you.
Thank you. You can go to the next one. I'm Murray Kucherabi, one of your two area directors. Francesca couldn't be here because she is on maternity leave. I was hoping to have a photo of a newborn to all share with you, but that has probably not happened yet. Quick update on some meetings of interest coming of interest to this area. We have, you can see the list here. The couple that I want to point out, Tigris is a brand new working group meeting this week. MOC is going to attempt to create a BOF, it's a working group creating BOF. That might also be of interest to this area, and we have the usual litany at the bottom as well. Mimi, I think you wanted to say something. We'll give you a slot in AOB after I'm done my little bit. Next, please. So just some comments from us. Go next slide, please. Errata. People in this room may or may not know about Errata. It is a service, a record-keeping service provided by the RFC editor about documents that have already been published, but they need to have some kind of correction made to them or on the record so that people know there are corrections that have been recorded that you might need to know if you're implementing this specification. They can be also folded in later on if there's an update document done for like a BIS document that you've seen coming through. They're used for editorial mistakes, and if the document as published did not correctly capture the consensus of the working group, you don't use an erratum for saying, I think it should be something else. We will reject those. Next, please. These have historically, an erratum once processed is either rejected because it's wrong or improperly used. It's verified, meaning we've confirmed that this is true, this should be properly recorded and possibly processed later. The third state is HFDU, which Sean Turner says hold for the death of the universe, but it's hold for document update, wait for the next version before you actually do something with it. These are often left neglected and not actually processed. What you see here is the number of unprocessed in each of the three areas for ART and its previous versions, apps and RAI.
So we have a large body of work that hasn't been looked at yet. This is just historically something that we haven't paid much attention to, but they do need to get processed sooner or later. So some of these art ones are for current working groups. And so you can actually go and see if there's something here you could help us process as working group chairs or document authors, and see, you may have been notified that there's one filed against one of your documents. I'll be starting to process these slowly myself as much as I can. We can't rely on the current working groups to worry about errata from working groups that are gone or documents that were sponsored by ADs and had no working groups. But anybody who has in a working group where you could help us start processing some of these on your own, it would be great. Working group chairs, if you have the bandwidth to do that. Next slide, please. Any questions on errata before I go on? Okay, I didn't think there would be too much of that. This is the usual call for help for various roles within the IETF and within the art area. We need more volunteers to do the work that is the work of the area. It's not always working group chairs, although that's the common thing that we're asking for. But you know, if you want to be involved in reviewing requests from IANA, registries of media types is the big favorite one. Ned Fried is no longer with us. He was the champion of that one for many, many years. We're down to 2 people, one of whom is me, and I'm not supposed to be doing them while I'm an area director. So it would be great to have additional help. If you're interested in shepherding documents, it doesn't have to, working group chairs are not the only people allowed to shepherd documents. If you want to try to get you introduced to the process that way, talk to your working group chair about being willing to shepherd something. Working group secretary is a role that doesn't always appear, but help the chairs by recording consensus of your meetings, keeping track of issues in the trackers, that sort of thing. Please volunteer for that. Area review teams, we have the art area review team could use more people. And of course, working group chairs. If you're interested in learning more about the mechanics of how the work gets done here, you want to be more involved in it, talk to your working group chairs, talk to me, talk to any experienced IETFer, and we can point you out ways to get involved. Or if you know someone who might fit this description, we would love the extra help and to breed new talent. Next slide, please. The art area review team I just mentioned, this is an extremely useful to the area directors team of reviewers that look at documents mostly coming from other areas that are that may have aspects that touch art and should get proper consideration. I don't remember the size of the current pool of reviewers. It's you can find it online. They've done 28 reviews for us in the last 3 months, about 91 total in the last year. I looked to see if I could credit one person with having done way more than everybody else, but it is a fairly even distribution. Everybody's done maybe 3 to 4 this year. Thank you to those people who provide that service. It is very helpful to us during document reviews to have an extra perspective. And if you're interested in participating in this, Barry is here, and he's the current coordinator of art, and he would love to talk to you. Last slide. Go ahead.
Sorry, Barry's just joined the queue. So if you wanted to make a point
yeah, go ahead.
on this slide, Barry, go for it.
This is Barry Lieba. Well, I guess I wanted to say something Murray said about the previous slide also. Actually, could you, Kirsty, can you go back a slide? It was, oh, yes, volunteering as a working group chair. When I was an AD, I was looking for the same thing, of course. And what I want to stress is that even if it's not necessarily that there's a particular working group that needs a chair right now that you can volunteer for, although that, but also just let Murray and Francesca, or whatever your area directors are, that you'd like to be considered as a working group chair in the future when the need arises, because we're always looking for a pool of people to call on who might be new chairs, who might not have chaired for a while, and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then back to the art thing. What I try to do is do a little, I look at the documents quickly first and assign only ones that that look like they would benefit particularly from an art area review. So unlike Security Directorate, for instance, that tries to review every document going through, there are a lot of documents that in internet area, routing area, in with Yang models and stuff like that, that I decide we don't really need an art review of. So it's a pretty low effort thing. You just get a review assigned to you infrequently, and it's pretty easy. So please let me know if you are not already on the list and you would like to be. And the ADs would really appreciate the extra help.
We definitely do. And last slide, I think, is just a catch up on, we have folded the Internationalization Directorate into the art area. That was announced about 10 days ago, I think. The current reviews, the IETN are used to conduct internationalization framework reviews for documents that need them, EAI, Unicode, and so forth. The current chair of the IETN Directorate needs to move on to other duties, so we have folded them in. That has happened, just in case anyone missed the announcement. There is a breakfast for the art team, which now includes both organizations. Wednesday morning, it's in the agenda if you haven't seen that. We'll try to get some remote participation, because I think actually almost none of the internationalization people could make it this time, but we'll at least set up a laptop in the corner or something like that so that they can say hello and participate in any conversation. Any questions for your solo AD this time? Could do an open mic before the plenary. No, that's it then. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you, Mary. Very brave to open yourself up for a mini plenary in the art area meeting, but seeing no one in the queue and nothing in Jabber either. So we can conclude the meeting, give participants in the room and online 14 minutes back just to say thank you ever. Oh no.
Wait. Can I have 5 minutes to give a preview on Spin and ask people to come to Mimi Buff? Okay, I'll do it from here.
Yeah.
So I submitted a draft called Spin, but let me give a little context on the problem. The problem we're facing is that IETF has been working for decades on interoperability for voice and video communication between different providers. This has been pretty successful in some areas, but has totally failed when it comes to app-to-app interoperability, meaning like, can you make a video call between, say, Skype and FaceTime? You cannot. Can you send messaging from Wire to Signal? No, right? No, can't do that. WhatsApp to WebEx call? No. So none of that works. And that's mostly for business, commercial reasons. There's recently a new ray of hope that such a thing might someday happen due to some European regulation called the Digital Markets Act that recently is passed or getting passed or something of that sort. And so in response largely to that, a bunch of folks, I know Rowan wrote some documents and I wrote this document called Spin that's poking at different things that need to happen to provide a modern solution for voice, video, and messaging interoperability between, say, FaceTime and a Skype or whatever. So that's the topic of the Spin draft. There seems to be quite a bit of interest on the list. We're obviously not going to discuss that here in Dispatch, but there is a BOF called Mimi. It's a side meeting, which is, a BOF with a lesser room. I don't know, but it's a side meeting today. What time was it, Rowan? 4 p.m. today. In which room? Sorry. Philadelphia South. So downstairs mezzanine level. So if you're interested in this topic, we'll have this BOF. Rowan set it up. We're going to try and largely frame up a BOF for next IETF or engage interest. And I'm particularly interested, the hard part of this is getting the big players to adopt it. So if anyone's here from Google's or Apple's or primarily the ones that need to be interested in this thing to make it successful, I'm super interested to talk to you. Please come to that BOF. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for running in.
Jonathan said something which I did not hear. Is there remote participation in the side meetings? Yes, says Rowan Mahi. All right. On the Mimi mailing list. And in the side meetings portion of the wiki. I am now the Rowan Mahi translator. How sad that is. All right, thanks, folks.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And yeah, that was just what I was going to ask, if there's remote participation. WebEx details have been sent earlier today. on those lists and in those places. So thank you very much for bringing that, and we'll give you now 11 minutes back of your time. Thanks so much for coming to Dispatch. As always, thanks for your energy and opinions in the room, on the mailing list, and from virtual participants as well. So thanks everyone. Have a nice evening, night, day, morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bearing with me on not being able to log in. How are you?
Then I can just do the same thing I'm going to do while you're gone, but without all my stuff. But now that they're older. Let's see this one.